views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime. Of course, you're watching the show that brings you a little bit more insight into many of the inequities that people face, the topic of social justice. We provide multiple points of view, and then we also provide civic engagement. So we encourage you to stay with us because the Social Justice Forums starts right now. And welcome back. You are watching the Social Justice Forums. Teens Take Charge is a student-led movement for educational equity in New York City. It also develops civic leaders who shift power into the education system to students. Our first guest is an organizer aimed at making sure the public school system lives up to its promise of providing an equitable education for all. This includes providing a platform for more than 60 New York City high school students to share their experiences in the school system on stages across the city, at official hearings, as well as in meetings with policymakers, on television broadcasts, as well as on major news outlets. Joining us now to share a little bit more is details and organizer at Teens Take Charge and student at the Young Women's Leadership School of the Bronx, Maryam Choudhury. And Maryam, good to have you.
Hi, Daren.
Hi. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, too.
So give us a little bit about Teens Take Charge. Obviously, when we talk about young people and we talk about youth in particular, we see them at the front of a lot of social justice movements and a lot of movements all across the United States and literally all across the country. And for yourself, I know Teens Take Charge is an opportunity for young people to get involved at an early age.
Yeah, so Teens Take Charge is a very good organization. We always advocate for everything that's right because, 2020 has been a hard year. So we really wanted to focus on a lot of things like getting SYEP back. So that played on youth employment. And there were a lot of things like school segregation, which had to do with Black Lives Matter because, people of color are seen as minorities. So that, Teens Take Charge had to fight for them.
Mm-hmm. And so let's talk a little bit about a couple of things you just mentioned. You talked about summer youth employment. I remember being a young man a little years ago, and I was a part of the summer youth employment program. It was very major for me. I mean, I had an opportunity to work. I remember having to get your working papers and do all that kind of stuff and to actually be able to have a job. Talk to us about summer youth employment and how vital that is for young people today.
Youth employment is much more important than you think it is, especially during your high school ages, because right after high school, most people do go on to college and you are supposed to be employed to help you with their college, to pay with their tuition. Especially during this pandemic, a lot of people aren't employed. So we're just lacking resources, we're lacking the experience we need. And as young adults, we need this experience to be successful because we are the next generation and we are the future for New York City.
We also talk about segregation in school. That was another point that you brought up. Talk to us about the segregation that you feel occurs within schools.
There's a lot of data that shows that there are a lot of minority communities that have funding gaps. So predominantly white schools are getting much more funding. They are getting much more fundings than minority communities. So like, I'm pretty sure predominantly white communities have gotten $23 billion for their schools, but minority communities have not been getting that. And that just causes like the graduation rate to decrease because we're not getting the resources we need, the academic resources, the books, the opportunities, and that's just, bringing the graduation rate down.
Down and unacceptable. Talk to me about talking to your peers, right? Because let's be honest, when you're a young person, sometimes being civically engaged, socially engaged, politically engaged may not necessarily be at the forefront, but you yourself find yourself spreading this message of what's going on. How easy is it to really convey this message to your fellow youth? And how receptive are they, I should say?
Well, to convince them to the fellow youth, it's pretty easy because they have the same experience as me. The struggles, the pros, the cons, but other people like the Department of Education is very, hard to convince them because they're not seeing from the same eye that I'm seeing from. So it takes a little more hard work and extra step to convince them to give us the opportunities we need, to give us the fundings we need to be successful. But uh, as a youth together, it's pretty easy to convince them, and then after convincing them, taking them to the DOE and convincing everyone all together, it's not that hard. It has a very strong impact altogether.
Yeah. And so for you, when you think about what's going on right now, COVID-19 and how it's really impacted the lives of young people, what can you tell us and what can you share with us about how young people have been impacted by COVID-19?
Well, this pandemic has really affected a lot of people, especially students going to school, not going to school, not having like proper internet, helping out their families with money. That's why I was saying youth employment is important, because right now we are lacking a lot of employment experiences, because most of last year and most of this year probably too, because of the virus, a lot of people are not getting the experiences they need. On top of the experience, people do need money right now for their families. So as a youth, we do like to help our families a lot. So it's very hard for them. On top of that, the pandemic is really affecting a lot of people's mental health, which, that has a bad impact on everyone, on society. On top of that, a lot of people are not getting the funds they need. So schools cannot get the funds they need. A lot of students cannot get the scholarships they need to go to the college, their dream college that they work so hard to go to.
So when we talk about college, I know college is important, but I know in order to get to college, you got to have a healthy high school and you got to have a healthy, a healthy educational platform to actually be able to get there. Give us a little bit about what you feel is actually lacking in that classroom to prepare people to get ready for college.
Well, during this pandemic, I feel like it's a lot of the support is what we're lacking right now, because there we can't just walk up to the teacher anymore and say, hello miss, I need help with my work. Now it's just like we have to email them or we have to Zoom them, and that's not really the easiest, because everyone else now, our school life and our personal lives are mixing since we are doing school remotely. So it's just the lack of support we have, also the lack of resources. For example, like our English classes, we we had to read books through PDFs on websites. So that is really straining our eyes after having Zoom classes back to back.
And so I know you have this initiative and you talk about, you're raising your voice, you're creating this initiative to let your voice actually be heard. Let's talk a little bit about the initiative and Teens Take Charge and some of the things that you're looking to go see. You got some programs, and you got some components of your program. Share with us a little bit about it.
So Teens Take Charge, every time we have a campaign we want to do, we actually reach out to different organizations and different fundings. So Project 1424 is also aligned with youth employment. It's helping students or youth from ages 14 to 24, helping them get employment. For example, like SYP last year was canceled, and Teens Take Charge did a petition, and we were able to give about 35,000 jobs, I'm pretty sure. So it's like we do contact a lot of different organizations to help us with fundings, create petitions. People do donate, and that really helps us with our campaigns to get them out there. People do share on social media, the news, of course. So that really helps.
Yeah. And so I want to walk through a couple of things that you've got going on, particularly with your organization, Teens Take Charge. And I think you guys do some really great work. And one of the things that I understood about your summer youth employment program and even some of the initiatives that you're trying to see is that you want to see youth leaders be involved in the design and the development and the implementation of not just the summer youth employment program, but other programs concerning youth. Talk to us about having that youth voice, what that actually means in carrying out some of this stuff.
Youth voice is really important because it's specifically our experiences, not an adult's experience. As a youth, I will be getting the employment I need, so it is important for my voice to be heard. If my voice isn't heard, they won't really get the experience. They won't really they won't understand the necessities I have that employment can provide me.
And when we talk about youth, we talk about school, we talk about employment. I know another component that you guys deal with is that issue of school discipline. And that's discipline within the city school system, that you feel that that's unfair and needs some a drastic reformation. Talk to us about what you don't like, what you'd like to see happen.
Specifically, you're referring to like schools being unscreened and their admissions. So in particular, there are schools like SHSAT that they need to be unscreened, because if you do not have the money to get the tutoring and the resources and the books you need to get the SHSAT tutoring and the knowledge for that, you most likely will not succeed in the SHSAT test. And, you know, if I'm being very specific, minority communities, people of color do not have that type of money to have, fundings for SHSAT. So you can see predominantly white people are being shown in SHSAT schools. On top of that, a lot of schools like Eleanor Roosevelt, they have their admissions, they only accept a lot of certain people that live in their district, or some schools accept if you have like a certain attendance rate and other factors like that, which I seem is unfair, because you should be able to go to the school you want. On top of that, a lot of these, they should be considered into mind right now, especially as we're in a pandemic and a lot of people can't afford the tutoring or the books or get the resources they need.
So how do you see things playing out in 2021? I mean, obviously, we're still in the process of trying to navigate COVID. A lot of us are still doing virtual, but for yourself, do you feel like the work is hindered simply because we are virtual and you don't have the opportunity to do in-person meetings and in-person gatherings?
Yeah, I feel like being remote, it plays a big role in my education right now, because I can't explicitly get the resources I need, or it's not very easy to even focus on a computer. Your eyes wander off somewhere else, you end up going to Netflix, social media, you're not even paying attention to your classes. So it really, like, our education is at risk right now.
Thank you for being brutally honest. I mean, so many people think like, look, it's real easy. We just watch the computer, but there's other apps that you can watch. You can have 2 and 3 different things going on while class is going on. So it is really much harder to be distracted. Are you hopeful that, and are you really looking forward to getting back to in-person classes soon?
Yeah, I am. I was doing blended hybrid learning for a few months until it closed down, and I felt like that was more efficient for me. I had the teacher there. She was able to help me get back on track, and I had a lot of resources I needed there, like stable Wi-Fi.
Hmm. And so, yeah, that's another conversation about, equity and equality. Have you found in your youth, have you found a lot of young people have not been able to get Wi-Fi and the adequate equipment during this virtual learning? Because we're hearing some teachers say that they don't have it. We're hearing some parents say they don't have it. Bring it home for me.
Yeah, so a lot of youth, a lot of people in general just don't have stable Wi-Fi. And I think that is something the Department of Education needs to work on, because they are giving free laptops, they are giving free iPads, but these iPads come with T-Mobile Wi-Fi, but it's not the strongest if everyone in your community is using that Wi-Fi. And that really hinders on your Zoom class, because your Zoom class cuts off, you can't turn in your work and all these other factors.
Yeah. So what do you want people to know about your organization and how they can support?
You guys can, fund us, contact us, anything that comes in mind, because there are a lot of problems around New York City, in the US in general. So these are problems that we would like to solve and advocate for.
And so what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I'm pretty sure emailing one of the steering committee people or the adult allies in the group.
And so I need to talk about, before we go, one last thing. When we talk about the summer, and we talk about the summer coming, uh, it's coming pretty quickly. We really want to be honest about it. When we look about the summer and jobs, how valuable will it be or I should say, how painful would it be if the summer jobs program is cut as a result of COVID?
Well, it's not the first time it's being cut. And of course, Teens Take Charge will fight to get every employment back that will be provided in the summer. But it will be hard, because the, you won't have anything to do, because you won't have Zoom class to attend. For a lot of people, gyms, basketball courts, parks, they're very dangerous to go to with the virus spreading. So employment is very important. It's an easy way to make money and gain experience helping our future. So
Maryam, Choudhury, thank you so much for being with us and being a guest here on the Social Justice Forums, Teens for Change. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, we are taking a quick break. We want you to stay with us. We do have more on the Social Justice Forums. We'll return right after this. And welcome back. Friends of the Children is a not-for-profit organization that's dedicated to breaking the cycle of generational poverty through salaried professional mentoring. They select children facing multiple systemic obstacles from Harlem and the South Bronx and commit to working with those children from kindergarten all the way through graduation. Their mission is to impact generational change by empowering youth who are facing the greatest obstacles through relationships with professional mentors. Their 12-year intervention program redefines the landscape of mentoring and what success means for the most vulnerable children in New York City. They also have redefined the youth mentoring field by creating the first and only long-term professional mentoring program in the country. Here to provide more information is the New York Executive Director at Friends of the Children, Gary Clemons. And Gary, good to have you here on the show, and welcome and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, a much needed topic to talk about when you talk about mentoring, right? Something that is very vital in the lives of young people. And it seems as though you guys got your hands on the pulse. So for those of you, those people who don't know about your organization, give us a little bit of an intro.
Yeah, so the organization actually started in Portland, Oregon. The model started in Portland, Oregon 27 years ago. We've been here in New York for 20 years. And what we do, we look for the kids that have been most marginalized by systems, so by the criminal justice system, the foster care system, social services, and we give them a paid professional mentor for 12 and a half years, starting between the age of 4 and 6, all the way till they graduate from high school. The things that make us unique is that we're looking for the kids that have been marginalized the most in our community, and we pay our mentors. So this is actually a full-time job, so it's a 40-hour-a-week job. Each mentor has 8 to 10 kids they're responsible for, and they meet with each kid for 4 hours each week, year round, and they do that for 12 and a half years. We have outcomes that we're looking for. We don't want our kids to be impacted by the criminal justice system. So 95% of our kids stay away from the criminal justice system. 91% of our kids graduate from high school, and 94% wait till after their teens to become parents. But 100% of our kids either attend college, are gainfully employed, or enroll in the military after being in our 12 and a half year program.
That's an awesome statistic. Talk to me a little bit about this for a moment, because when you talk about kids who actually go to school, kids who are graduating, kids who are, being productive in society, the mentorship component is major. Give us a little bit about how important is mentorship in the lives, because obviously in order to turn the corner, you got to have somebody walking alongside. So talk about the power of mentorship and what you've experienced through mentorship.
Yeah, the power of mentorship is, like you said, is just really important. It's important to have credible messengers. So people that have kind of walked the journey before you, and you can kind of learn from their mistakes, and not make the same mistakes. And so our mentors, we look for mentors that reflect the population that we serve. So we look for mentors that are from Harlem, South Bronx, or live in New York City, and then we pay them. Pay them a fair wage so they can go out and really help the community. The mentors, all the mentors that we work with, have at least 3 year experience working with this population, and they all make a 5-year commitment to us. So that's another big thing, is continuity. A lot of times when we're talking about marginalized communities, because of the way systems impact us, it leads to a lot of it leads to the stability gap, where people kind of come and go in our lives because the system maybe takes people away from our lives, or you lack opportunities or resources. So having that continuity is so important. Like I said, our average mentor stays for 5 years. So to have that person that you can rely on for 12 and a half years, no matter what, is so important. And the mentor not only just works with the kids, but they also work with the families as well, and then other systems that the child may be involved with, because we understand that kids they don't live in a vacuum. So it's so important that you kind of work with other people that are also in that child's life, is a big piece too.
Yeah. When we talk about poverty, I know one of the aims and the missions is to really reduce and to get rid of generational poverty. Many times people talk about poverty just from an economic point of view, but there's so much more attached to poverty. How do you view poverty from your perspective?
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. I think poverty is having limited exposure opportunities to resources, to opportunities and social supports. I think a lot of times when you think about impoverished communities, that's the common theme that I see, that community, for a lot of different reasons. I think we all know those reasons, but a lot of different reasons, opportunities have been removed from that community. Resources have been removed from that community. So even resources when it comes to extracurricular activities or finding your passion is kind of hard when you live in certain communities. And then social supports. When you think about the criminal justice system, on what they have done to social support. So they remove a father and a mother or an uncle, aunt from people's lives. And so a lot of times when I think about poverty, I think about those elements, and how do we figure out how to bring those elements back to a child's life, so they can have the opportunities to be successful economically. So that's when I think about poverty, I think about those things.
Yeah. And when you talk about mentorship and you bridge those two together, mentorship, and then you have that social elements and the social elements associated with poverty, talk about how that one, plays in right with the other, because part of success is about socialization. And so I'll ask that question first, and I want to come back and talk to you about COVID-19 after that. But go ahead, Nancy, take the first one.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. A lot of times, because of maybe what's going on in the family's life, they're just dealing with life. And I know I've been, interested talking about your question about COVID, but they're just dealing with life and just dealing with poverty. So a lot of times, it's hard to take advantage of opportunities, because if you're just trying to, survive, or to take advantage of a resource, of have access to resources, or know where to get the resources from. So the mentorship is so important, to have that extra person in your life to help connect you to those opportunities, to help you connect you to those resources. Myself, I'm from a very similar situation to some of the kids are from, and because I've had mentors that came into my life, I was lucky. I had mentors that came into my life at certain points in my life, and they gave me opportunities. They gave me the social supports. They gave me the resources I need to be successful. Somebody gave me $1,500 to start a business when I was, in my mid-20s, and I was able to start a business. And that took me out of poverty. So I think it's just so important that when you have these certain crossroads in your life, is to have that person there to help, that you can bounce ideas off of, that can walk alongside you, and to make sure that you maybe choose the right path, or they can empower you to choose the right path. So that's where I think mentorship is so important. And then again, I would just hit on it again, that credible messenger, a lot of times is so important. So having someone that looks like you, that understands your culture, that understands your community, I think is another added element to it. So mentorship is just a big piece when we think about this whole landscape of restorative justice or social justice. I think it's such a added element to it.
Yeah. I'm born and raised in Harlem, came out of Scenic Projects, and I'm where I am today. But I also recognize that I had a lot of people around me, and I had that support network that really, that really made the difference. And I think that when you have a support network, that support network can make you. And if it's negative, of course, it could actually break you. But you guys have done a great job of providing that positive support network. But has the network been interrupted, given the fact we talked about COVID-19? How has it impacted what you do? How has it impacted young people who've got these mentors? And now, guess what? We're all facing this COVID-19 pandemic.
Correct. No, I think, the COVID-19 has affected our staff, but what we were able to do was able to pivot and move everything remotely. So right when COVID hit in March, we did an assessment with our families to figure out what their needs were. So we found out, where was food insecurities, people that didn't have the appropriate Wi-Fi or devices, people that were having job insecurities, or just figuring out how they didn't know how to manage each day. And so the mentors did a great job of fulfilling those needs. And I think a lot of times when you think about certain communities, especially the communities that we work with, the most marginalized, people want to help them when a COVID-19, a pandemic happens. And I think if you don't have relationships with those people, it's hard to step in and say, oh, now I'm here to help you, because they're like, who are you? So I think it's so important for a group like ours. We have 3, 5, 10-year relationships with these families. So when we reach out and we say, hey, what do you need? How can we help? We're already in a position we're in a trusted position. And so we were able to have that assessment. We responded. For the first 3 or 4 months, we removed to everything remote. So we did Zoom meetings. So people did a great job of coming up with creative outings with the kids. We got in contact with the parents more. So we made sure the parents were connected to job resources, that food insecurities wasn't a problem. So we set up a food pantry. And then we made sure everybody had appropriate devices. So it's so important that people stay connected to one another. And so that was another added bonus that we did. But we just seen, everything, everything that people read, it was just, magnified by COVID-19. But we were able to respond accordingly because of the relationships that we had pre-COVID.
So when we talk about change, right, we're trying to change, and 2021 is that year. We're in a new year. It's hard to believe it already, but some of us are just really excited about it. But that change, talk to me about the change that you're trying to see happen this year, and then that change that we're also trying to see generationally, right? Because I know that the work that you're doing is really about promoting generational change.
Yeah, and actually what we started doing about 2 years ago, we started a program, what we call our 2Gen program, because we found that we were working with the kids, and as you know, we were having great success, but we realized that generations were impacted by systems for a long time. So 2 years ago, we started working with specifically people that have aged out of the foster care system or have been impacted by the criminal justice system. So parents that have been impacted by the criminal justice or foster care system, and giving them, giving the child the mentor, but not only giving the child, but also giving the parent the mentor as well. Because we found that through the years of our model that we were also having positive impacts on the parents. Parents were able to navigate systems better. They were more involved in their child's school. And so we have what we call our 2Gen model, where we're working with the parent and the child and helping them to outcomes, because the whole thing is social capital is so important. I mean, if you think about all the stuff that's happening is to remove social support from people's life. And when people are isolated, that's when they're most vulnerable. So the more that we can put social supports in people's life, the better. And that's where our model really, tries to do, is try to bring people together so they're not so isolated. So that's one way we're doing with the 2Gen. Another thing that we're doing now too, we really want to help our kids and our families have agency and help them be more civically engaged. And so we started two committees, two policy committees. So we have a youth-led policy committee where we're talking about things that are going on. So we're going over the Breonna Taylor case and no-knock warrants and figuring out what we can do around those things. But then we're also talking to the parents and really having the parents reflect on their own journey and figuring out what systems maybe have impacted them and help them advocate for change that's in those systems. So if they're seeing, in when it comes to the police system, the criminal justice system, the ACS foster care system, housing, we want to give them voices, and so we are coming together, helping them form their own coalition and joining other coalitions to help the families have voice, because that's another thing. Social capital and giving people a voice so they feel like they have some control of their future is another big thing that we're really working on for 2021.
So how do people, become a mentor? Somebody's watching right now saying, listen, you know what? I may want to become a mentor. Talk to us about how they can be a part of that and how they can join and be a part of the organization.
Yeah, so if you go on the friendsnewyork.org, you can reach out and info. You can info friendsnewyork.org and get in contact with us. This year, we're adding 50 new kids to the program. So we were looking for 4 amazing mentors. So if you have 3-year experience working with this population, you're willing to make a 5-year commitment to us, just reach out. And we're going to start our hiring process probably mid-January, and we go through 4 different interviews. But if you have a strong passion for the work and for the community, we'll train you. So we have 2 weeks of training where we'll train you on how to be culturally informed practices, how to work with data. We have a core asset curriculum where we teach kids how to growth mindset, positive relationship building. So we're training you on those things, but we really need that commitment from you to really care about the kids and the community.
Yeah. Give us I call it boots on the ground. You got boots on the ground when it comes to young people. What are we missing in terms of understanding and navigating this particular generation? Is there something that maybe we're not paying attention to that we might ought to be paying closer attention to?
Yeah, I think it's so important that we understand for the last 40 years that there's a group of kids or a group of people that we maybe have demonized. So people that have been impacted by the criminal justice system, people that have been impacted by ACS, and we've kind of said, I'm different than them over there, but actually we're all connected. And I think it's so important that we don't demonize any aspects or anybody on the spectrum of Blackness. And I think for a long time, well, not for long, but the last 40, 50 years, we started demonizing certain groups of people that are on that spectrum. And so if you look at George Floyd or some of the other people that passed away, these are people that maybe practice the hip hop culture, or practice using phonics and have a different forms of education. And I think it's so important that as the Black community that we come together and that we see each other all as brothers. Because I think for me, I grew up in a hip hop culture, and then I identify with the hip hop culture. I use different words, but I'm also college educated and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's so important that don't make our kids that have to have a choice where they either got to choose their identity or success. I think it's so important that it should be intertwined, that you should be able to keep your identity and be successful too. And so I think it's when we're thinking about the younger age, they identify with other things. And for us to say that's okay. Hey, if you identify with that, if you want to talk, dress, act like that, that's okay, as long as you're doing positive things for your community and for the world. We support that. So I think those things are just so important. And then just taking time to give back to community, I think is another important. I think these kids, want somebody that they know is going to be there for them through thick and thin. Somebody's going to be there with them no matter what. So I think the more, us adults that we can show that we're with kids and we support the next generation no matter what, or we support our people no matter what, the better. Because it's just so much, we have so much richness in our community, and there's so much, there's genius everywhere. And I think the more we believe that, the better. Regardless of where somebody grew up or where somebody was born, I think is so important.
Yeah. Well, Carrie, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forums. We really enjoy having you. And definitely, if people want to continue in the mentorship or be a part or get connected to the organization, we're going to give them that information also throughout the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All righty. We're taking a quick break here on the Social Justice Forums. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We'll come right back in a few.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is
Well, welcome back. Since the start of the pandemic, many small businesses throughout the state have been finding ways to really stay afloat, while others have been forced to close their doors for good. Congress has signed into law a new $900 billion coronavirus relief and stimulus package. The second stimulus package dedicates $284 billion to the Paycheck Protection Program, better known as PPP, by giving federal forgivable loans to hard-hit small businesses. Joining us now to share more of the details is the president of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Sorin, and the executive director of the Third Avenue BID, Michael Brady. And both of you, Happy New Year and welcome to the show.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. I think that's about the only happy that we can have right now, given the fact that as we're looking to a new year, we're looking for some new opportunities. And new opportunities are what businesses are looking for. Lisa, I'll start with you talking about this Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. Second round coming, but what does that really mean for businesses, particularly in the Bronx?
You know, I think it goes in various ways. One is the criterias of losing 25% and only capping at 60% for employee for payroll is problematic. I mean, 25%, where are they, what time are they using, right? Because at one point we were open to some degree, 25% indoor, and I'm only speaking about the city, which we are being treated differently from anywhere outside the 5 boroughs. You know, they open, they close, they change the regulations. So the 25% loss is huge. Those who already got the PPP are working through the forgiveness, and they keep laying off employees. So doing 60%, can their shift? I really honestly believe that this is very problematic. And I don't think that at this point, we are able to sustain it for our borough.
And when we talk about PPP, let's get a little bit more in depth. We know that that money is slated to come. Michael, any estimation as to when these funds will actually be available and businesses will be able to go ahead and apply?
Sure. Well, we're looking that the funds will be available probably within the next week or week and a half, depending on the guidelines that are coming out from Treasury and the SBA. And to really underscore Lisa's point, the regulatory changes to the Paycheck Protection Program that we've seen to date are really problematic and going to pose some hurdles for small businesses. One is the burden of proof of a 25% revenue loss. The second is the only covering 60% of a salary for an employee, which is really just a slap in the face. But then, also, the original concept of the Paycheck Protection Program was to provide a 2.5-month lifeline to small businesses. A lot of the small businesses in our borough and throughout New York City, and indeed throughout the United States, are really saying this is too little too late. And the more hurdles that we're putting on small businesses to access these funds are really just going to continue to close the doors of small businesses throughout the country. So we're very concerned that the Paycheck Protection Program timeline is delayed, but also just the restrictions that are coming with this round of the PPP program are really problematic, and the funding is not going to reach the businesses that need it most. In order to demonstrate a 25% revenue loss, businesses have to have the sophistication to be able to run a P&L. They have to have the sophistication to understand how they were able, the tax implications of dealing with the first round of PPP. And does that go in your revenue? Is that an asset or is that a liability? And where does that fall in your budget line? And if it is going into your revenue and your assets, does that contradict the 25% revenue loss that so many businesses have to prove now moving forward?
Yeah. And so, Lisa, walk me through this here. What are you hearing from Bronx businesses, particularly with this, with the PPP now coming out? And before, let's go back, even before the PPP. Tell me what you were hearing from Bronx businesses, boots on the ground, in the wake of all these ever-changing laws. As we mentioned, New York City held to different standards compared to the state.
Right. Well, I hope you have 3 hours for me. But that being said, let's start with the fact that New York City has never, in the course of the last 10 months or however long it's been, has never been able to join the ranks of those outside of our 5 boroughs. And we're talking Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, all the way up to Suffern and all those areas up all the way to Albany. Their numbers have been higher than anything that we've seen here in this city. They are allowed to have indoor dining. They're allowed to have outdoor areas to eat. We have been handcuffed, right? So you have the outdoor dining that's year round. That's wonderful. But then the minute we had the snowstorm, there were take everything down and or build these structures. You build these structures and now they're not meeting criteria. So you have to tear down those structures. Those are all costs that these businesses are taking on. The other areas, other counties are not. So what we're trying to figure out is a lot of these new outdoor places are putting in windows and building attached to their, what is the difference of the indoor versus eating outdoors with the same type of structure? So our restaurants are at a point of evaporating, leaving, closing their doors. Then we're seeing businesses and restaurants that are closing in hopes that they can open sometime in the spring. Do they qualify for all these loans? Who knows, because the regulations, again, keep changing. Now you have the outdoor retail, which is wonderful. Now they've extended it to September, bring your services out. But the vendor issues, the illegal vending is not being addressed. Sanitation issues are not being addressed. So now you have all this congregation onto our sidewalks where, who comes first, the egg or the chicken? Who has the ability to use the outdoors? Is it your brick and mortars? Are the brick and mortars giving up their space so other people can take even their sidewalks? The frustration levels are huge. And prior to us starting this conversation, we were just saying that I'm one exit. My office is one exit away from Westchester County. And, I can literally go under 10 minutes, 6 minutes maybe, and have indoor breakfast and with a group of 4 or 5 of us, very, using safety and social distancing. And why are we taking our money out of the 5 boroughs? Why are we taking it out of the Bronx, the hardest hit borough, the highest rates of COVID during the first line of epidemics? So I feel like we are paying a price, an unnecessary price, because we're the 5 boroughs. I'm not sure what it is. All I know is boots on the ground are saying, we're tired of loans. Don't give me any more loans. You're going to keep shutting us down. Give us grants. Give us an extension on the loans. Talk to our landlords. And the same type of restrictions you're giving us, the landlords need help also. They're a small business. So I'm not taking away from the fact that they also need to get paid. But the system has to work uniformly. You can't say you're going to help a business and shut them down. You can't say you're going to help landlords and landlords are trying to evict their commercial businesses. I mean, it's a push and pull. And while everybody else outside our borough, all the way to Long Island, are somewhat still within having normal 50% eating and the restrictions at 10 o'clock, or, you know, we are handcuffed to not being able to do anything and spend our money elsewhere. Or it's almost like you're promoting us to go online and shop, and that's not fair to our businesses.
Yeah, I see Michael shaking his head like, agree, agree, agree. I also want to talk about one perspective. What if you're a commercial landlord? You know, if you're a landlord of a commercial building, and you're a landlord of a commercial building and you're not getting your money, that also presents another problem as well. Michael, talk to me about that. Talk to me about what you're seeing over there on 3rd Avenue side.
You know, it's the fact of the matter is that because the federal stimulus and the federal planning has been so delayed, and because the city and the state really have no plan for small businesses, we're seeing entire neighborhoods and communities destabilized. And I don't use that to be flippant, but you know, if a small business can't function, they can't pay their rent, they're not able to support the commercial stock of a commercial corridor. So that creates more vacancies. The landlord is then defaulting their mortgage, which increases the foreclosure rate, which impacts the tax base, which impacts the services on the ground. The fact of the matter is that we knew this was coming in March. We proposed several policies to the city, state, and federal government. Some of them were adopted, some of them weren't, that would help safeguard and stabilize our neighborhoods. And sadly, a lot of our elected officials have never been small business owners, have never been property owners, and they don't have that lived experience. And they're you know, picking up the progressive banner saying, oh, we have to do this, this, and this, but they're not thinking about the long-term game, which is the stability of our neighborhoods. In the Bronx, it's really dire. I mean, we have neighborhoods like Woodlawn, which has a COVID-19 transmission rate approaching 20%, one of the highest in New York City, that we have no plan for. Woodlawn is also home to a bustling commercial corridor. And, you know, we're predicting that on Monday, the governor and the mayor are going to be announcing a whole new line of restrictions that are going to reduce retail capacity, close non-essential businesses, and you know, herald in another wave of these punitive restrictions for small businesses in New York City, when our peers throughout the state and throughout the country are much higher, and they don't have those restrictions put on them. So we have businesses and landlords which are really feeling the impact, and it's unfortunate that we're not thinking in the long term, because our tax base is going to be decimated, and we're going to feel those lack of services probably for the next decade. So, you know, we're anticipating huge cuts to things like sanitation, police, EMS, all of those other items, because landlords are either going into foreclosure or just not able to pay their taxes because their tenants aren't paying their rent. And that's problematic that we have yet to really address this on the state level. And the city is doing what it can in that respect, but just quite frankly, the city doesn't have the power to address this. It has to be addressed on the state level. So we're in a critical time right now, where if government doesn't pull its proverbial head out of its, we're really screwed for the long term.
Lisa, talk to me a little bit more about this whole situation where really trying to get out of this. Michael just said possibly 10 years. Do you agree? Could it be possibly 10 years before we can see a recovery? I mean, we saw the Bronx and we've seen decline before in the borough of the Bronx. Could we potentially be seeing a long depression?
You know, and it's interesting that you say that, because I agree with Michael. You know, the Bronx was on an uphill trajectory of success, something it hasn't seen probably in its history. The amount of construction, the job rate, the unemployment loss was at its lowest. We went from 2 digits to, I believe we were at about 6%, something the Bronx has never seen before. And so, but yet we're the hardest hit. And yet when it comes time to provide resources, we are not getting the resources. And allow me to add another aspect to this, right? So the vaccination issue. Now they're starting to see other industries, frontline workers, optometrists, and their staff, people who have stayed open to keep people like us with glasses and eye issues open. Yet, New York City has no vaccination points. If you have a business here in the Bronx, you have to travel to Putnam or Westchester or all the way upstate to be able to get your staff and your doctors vaccinated. Yet we're the hardest hit. So when we're talking about saving our businesses and we're talking about being able to get back on our feet, the Bronx listen, the Bronx can get through everything, right? I'm a true believer that throw us with the hardest hit and we will get through it. But if what we're doing is being caged and being held back from resources that will allow us to move forward, then you're almost saying to us, just, get in the back of the line again. And when I get to you, we will help you out. So all this talk about let's focus on the hardest hit communities of color, businesses that are closing, our commercial quarters that are seeing up to 40% losses, vacancy rate and graffiti. And I mean, it is literally out of control. And yet you're putting us on the back burner to provide our frontline workers, small businesses, mind you, that employ 100, 150 people, under 100. Those are still 100 people who continue to work that are keeping your small business open, family-owned businesses, and they don't have the resources to get their employees and doctors vaccinated because you have to get online behind every other county that's not New York City. Long Island has it, Westchester have it. I saw the list today and it's absolutely a smack in the face to our 5 boroughs and especially the Bronx, because our reporters and our media have no problem saying what a horrible, dire need, oh, poor Bronx, but provide us the services. Bronxites are strong. We're ready to get working. In people like Michael, the bids, merchant associations, the chambers, we're ready to get our hands dirty, allow us the opportunity to do it, and they're not. So the level of frustration is huge. And the only reason it will take us that long is because our representatives from local, state, and federal are not seeing us as a priority. We are the pity party that they can hang their hats on. And I'm sick of that. And our businesses are paying the price. And in turn, the residents.
Michael, you jump in?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to note that, it took us roughly 20 years to get the Bronx unemployment rate where down, to get workforce up, to get our GDP where it needed to be, to get development happening, to make use of underutilized brownfields and properties. And it only took 6 months to put unemployment in the Bronx back up to 22%. So when we talk about the trajectory of this, it really underscores the systemic challenges of the Bronx economy, with the majority of our workforce being in the hospitality or healthcare sectors. Those are the sectors most impacted by COVID-19. I would also underscore that, a lot of our elected officials on the city, state, and federal level love to say that small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and they really are. Small businesses represent 54% of the workforce in New York City. So if small businesses close, you're losing 54% of your sector base. But yet, when it comes to passing smart legislation and smart policy, the city, state, and federal folks are out to lunch. When the pandemic first started, the people who stood up were the folks on the ground, the chambers, the bids, business organizations, while our elected officials stepped out. It's very easy for an elected official to say, oh, work from home. But if you're a frontline worker or you're a small business owner, you don't have the luxury of working from home. And you're engaging with people all the time. And the fact that we're not offering these critical life-saving services to our frontline businesses is really horrid. Particularly because they've already been smacked in the face by mandated closures. They've been smacked in the face by lack of PPE. They've been smacked in the face by lack of financial resources. And now we're telling small businesses, oh, you have to get online, or you can't quite get the vaccine yet, although we're expecting you to engage with the general public every day. It's really sickening. And, this is not a slight at the city, state, or the federal level, but it really just underscores how out of touch elected officials are with small businesses. I think it underscores a sea change that has to occur that puts the right people in office to make decisions.
Yeah. My next question was, what have you heard from elected officials? Is it just political talk, or are we seeing action? And I think for you, I guess I could sense by the frustration that it's been so much talk and not enough action. Let me ask this question here. I had this conversation with somebody over the phone and getting ready for today. And they said, with all that's going on and the possible decimation that Bronx businesses could see, it also paves the way potentially for gentrification even further. Agree? Disagree?
Absolutely. You know, I think you're going to have, and this is not just in the Bronx, it's all of New York City, but the Bronx especially, you have office stock in a lot of our commercial corridors, the upper floors, that are, people just said, okay, I don't need it anymore. All of my employees are going to work from home. And if we do bring our employees back, it's going to be in a much smaller footprint, and we're going to do a hybrid model of remote and in office. So you're going to have this enormous amount of office stock that comes online. Compounding that, you have a tremendous amount of ground floor vacancies that probably won't be filled anytime soon unless we see a market correction in rents and taxes. And, you know, I think Vicky Bean, you know, put the nail in the coffin when she said the de Blasio administration will not be fixing New York State's property tax code anytime soon. So, you know, I think that having all of those vacancies leaves opportunities for folks out of state, out of borough, whomever, to come in and buy large swaths of properties and then develop them however they want. And, you know, whether you are for gentrification, against gentrification, pro-development, what have you, you know, it is a big concern because we're going to see a tremendous change in our landscape. Both physically and and through our ideologies. You know, the face of retail is changing. I see fewer storefronts, more offices on the ground floors, more shared public space on the ground floors, which tap into, you know, tax benefits which makes people, you know, either they can get some cash or they can go higher. You know, we're going to see a lot of changes in the commercial sector. And this is something that I don't see on the radar of a lot of elected officials, a lot of policymakers, the EDC. I don't think we're looking at the trajectory of what New York City will look like in 20 years. And that's really scary because we have the tools to understand what it would look like, and we have the tools to guide it where it should be. And the fact that we're not doing that and we're not preparing for the worst is really, really disheartening. We've been dealing with the pandemic now for what, 9-10 months. We have not passed policies on the state, local, or federal level to safeguard from the next natural disaster. And that's problematic because that means we're not learning from our history. And the only way to learn from our history is to do it while we're learning. If not, a year goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years goes by, and we forget about it. And I think our road to economic recovery is going to be really, really dicey. I look at 9/11 or post-Sandy, both areas we haven't fully recovered from yet.
Yeah. Lisa, I got to go. Only have like 30 seconds left. If somebody wants to get involved with PPP, find out about PPP, maybe there's a business owner watching, talk to us about where they can go, where they can get more information.
We have put together, consolidated a list of CDFIs and banks and partners who are offering PPP, who are keeping us up to date as to when it will be, some of these applications will be available and their systems ready to take on. Mike is hosting a webinar on Thursday regarding the PPP. So the combination of both, I suggest you can either call us 718-828-3900. I have my team here, my specialist, ready to answer, or definitely reach out to the Third Avenue bid, who also will have the information. And one last thing, I know 28 have 5 seconds to say that the small business community is going to start rallying behind the fact that this year are elections. The small business community has stayed quiet all these years, and I suggested the elected officials start taking us a little more seriously.
Well, that about wraps it up for the Social Justice Forums. I'm Daren Jaime. Be sure to tune in next week. You can watch us on BronxNet's channel 67. And also, if you have Verizon, that's channel 2133, or anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. Take care. We'll see you next week, elevating the conversation and bringing you new information.